Thank you, and you're all very welcome. It is going to be a wonderful evening. And we are not only the Philosophy Society, but the University is greatly honoured that Their Excellencies Ambassador Boaz Modai and Ambassador Ahmad Abdelrazek have given us the honour to come along this evening and discuss what is one of the prevailing problems of our day. Of course, it's the topic which divides people, and there are deep sentiments on either side. We're going to have a polite, calm discourse this evening, and that I can rely on your cooperation. So it gives me pleasure to invite His Excellency Boaz Modai to first of all to address you as our first speaker this evening.
So Razak, I would like to thank first of all the organizers for this evening, and I'd like to thank the audience for coming to listen to us. Let me start by telling a few words about myself. I'm 8th generation in Jerusalem. In October 1811, exactly 203 years ago, Rabbi Abraham Shlomo Zalman Tzorev came from Vilnius to Jerusalem. He was the ancestor of this family that has now 20,000 descendants of my family. I know that there is a myth that some people around the world try to promote, and this is that in the land of Israel used to live only Arabs, while Jews arrived to it only after the Shoah, the Holocaust, and the Second World War. But me, like many hundreds of thousands of people who lived in this land when the state of Israel was established, and millions of their descendants prove that this is a myth and it's a lie. The ancestor that I mentioned, Rabbi Zalman Tzorev, was one of the founders of the biggest synagogue in the Jewish quarter of the old city. And this is the synagogue that was ruined twice, was destroyed once by the Ottoman Empire and second time by the Jordanians after the war in 1948. He was attacked in 1851 because he was too much involved with the building of this synagogue by some of his Arab neighbors, and he suffered and actually was dying for a few months until he died. Some people claim that this is the first Arab terror action against Jews in the land. You hear today. You hear today about the events taking place in the Temple Mount. There are radical Muslim elements that try, and unfortunately also amongst the more moderate elements, I'm speaking about the Palestinian Authority, who try to transform the Palestinian-Israeli conflict into a conflict between the two religions, Islam and Judaism. That is very dangerous for the region, it's dangerous for the land of Israel. But I think that before we speak about the present, we have to understand better the history. Temple Mount is the place in which Patriarch Abraham, by the way, the father of these two religions, more than 4,000 years ago, was ordered by God, according to the Old Testament, to sacrifices the life of his son. This is the place in which, according to the Bible, he promised Abraham that this would be his land and the land of his descendants. Already 3,000 years ago, Jerusalem was the capital of the Jewish people. King David decided to make it its capital, and his son Solomon built the first temple the years after. I want to stress and emphasize, Jerusalem was the capital of the Jewish people 3,000 years ago, and it was never, ever the capital of any other people. After the first temple was ruined in the year, and the second temple was built in the year 70 AD, the Romans destroyed the second temple, and that was the beginning of the time of the diaspora for Jews, for the Jewish people, for 2,000 years, and actually, to be very exact, for 1,878 years since the destruction of the temple and the expulsion of the Jewish people until the creation of the State of Israel in 1948, Jews around the world kept on praying with their faces towards Jerusalem. In their prayers, especially in the holidays, they used to say, next year in Jerusalem. By the way, for those of you who don't know, Jerusalem is a synonym for Zion, the word Zion, which also means the land of Israel, and this is where the word Zionism comes from Jerusalem. It shows the relations between the people and its capital. In the Bible, in the Old Testament, Jerusalem is mentioned 667 times. In the New Testament, it is mentioned 142 times. In the Quran, not even once. There are a lot of Muslims, I speak about more mainly radical, but not all only, who try to disconnect this linkage between the Jewish people and Jerusalem and claim that there is no such historical connection. And this is being claimed by people who introduced Islam to the world 1600 years after the first temple, the Jewish temple, was standing in Jerusalem. In Hebrew, some of you may have heard the word chutzpah. This is the description of this attempt to try and disconnect the relations between us and our land and our capital. Now I would like to leave the history, the ancient history, and move back to our dates. You all heard about the war that took place in the summer in Gaza, in the Gaza district. You all saw the terrible images and the sad images of people being brought to hospitals, including children. These children, and not only children, but people who were innocent people who were involved in this battle had no reason to die, and if not the Hamas, they would have still been alive now. Hamas and the other terrorist organizations in Gaza. I don't know how many of you tried and managed to understand.
You'll be asked to leave if that occurs.
I don't know how many of you understand how this round, which is actually the third round in five and a half years, was brought about in different interviews that I gave to the Irish media. They claim, some of my interviews claim that this is an asymmetric conflict between two sides that are not equal. I agree with this claim, but I just want to look at it from a different perspective, a different angle. It is an asymmetric conflict, because on one hand, we are speaking about a conflict between the only Jewish state in the world, between us and the Arab world, which contains 22 countries, and altogether there are 57 Muslim countries in the world. The vast majority of them do not accept the right of Israel to exist. The vast majority of our neighbors don't want us in this neighborhood. If you compare Israel to Gaza, if you compare the government of Israel to the government of the Hamas, you see on one side a democracy, a vibrant democracy in which everyone has the right to express their views, to study in any university they would like. If they want, they can write a letter to the editor in the paper, or they can write a talkback to online newspapers. They can speak on the radio, and certainly they can vote in the elections. In Israel, everyone can express his views, even though very often these views are against or oppose the view of the government, and sometimes even the view of the vast majority of Israelis. When in Gaza, people express views that do not go very correctly with the aspiration or the beliefs of the leadership, their heads are being covered. They are being taken to the streets and they are being shot at the heads. And I just want to emphasize that Gaza, meaning I speak about the Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and the other terrorist organizations, are not the only ones The same is being done in Syria and Iraq by the Islamic State. The same is being done in Iran, in which people are being hanged or stoned for their political views, for their sexual orientation, for adultery and other accusations, some very often not connected to reality at all. But I think that maybe the biggest difference between us and our enemies is the attitude towards life. Israelis, and maybe I can say that about Jews in general, sanctify life. For us, every person that loses his life, and it could be an Israeli citizen, a soldier, an officer, or an innocent that is being killed on the other side of the border, brings us to deep sorrow. Amongst the radical Muslims, the whole idea is to sanctify the death. I heard it, I don't know how many of you experienced the same thing, a mother that that her child was killed while taking a terrorist action, bombing himself together with Israeli civilians. And she was asked about it, and she said that she's very proud of him, and she's ready to sacrifice her next boys, because this way her son became a martyr. That's a big privilege for the family. I don't think people in the West can understand it. I certainly cannot. And I know that many of our enemies believe that this is a weakness. We don't. We know that this is our strength. During the Operation Protective Edge in Gaza, we've seen the Hamas terror, on one hand launching rockets towards civilians indiscriminately, on the other hand using their own civilians as human shields. This is a double war crime, and they did it during the whole operation for 50 days. This whole war, and I have to emphasize that, was forced on us. Israel didn't want this war. We were dragged into it by the Hamas, who kept on shooting at Israel from, actually, they never stopped since 2005, since Israel withdrew unilaterally and completely from the Gaza district. There were missiles being shot towards Israel once in a while, and then towards this summer we've seen the amount of missiles increasing. And at a certain point, after containing the situation for weeks, Israel decided that it had to retaliate. We had no other choice. There was those that during this war, the 7 weeks of war in Gaza, counted the number of deaths and decided accordingly who were the right and the wrong of the war, in this war. I find it ridiculous, because according to this, since there were more German civilians who died during the Second World War, if you compare them to the British and other allies' civilians, one can draw the wrong conclusion that the Nazis were right in this war. So we have to be very careful not to count the deaths, because that doesn't mean anything. We had a lot of claims regarding an unproportional response by Israel. I want to emphasize, I heard these claims already in my first interview on the 8th of July. On the first day, my interview knew already that Israel was taking unproportional measures to retaliate. And I asked it also during my interviews, what would be proportional? If Israel would have launched one missile indiscriminately towards Gaza for every missile that was shot at us, and there were 4,500 missiles like that during the war, would that have been considered to be proportional? 1 for 1? Thanks to the anti-missile system, the Iron Dome, hundreds, if not thousands, of Israeli lives were saved because it intercepted these missiles. And the Israelis were also very disciplined in running to the shelters each time that they heard the siren. And I want to ask you, and to leave this question open, does it make sense that Israel is the only country in the world that has no right to defend itself? I also want to mention that, does it make sense that the only country in the world that has no right to defend itself happens to be the Jewish state? Does it make sense? Is the government of Israel the only one that has no obligation to defend its civilians? I doubt it. Now, this is not everything. During the war, Israel tried to take care of injured on the other side. We built a hospital on the Erez crossing in order to bring the civilians that were injured during the war to save their lives. By the way, we keep on doing it now. Hundreds of Syrians that were wounded during the war in Syria were brought to Israeli hospitals in Israel and were treated, and in many cases their lives were saved. I know you don't read a lot about it in the Irish Times, and you only have to ask yourselves why, because this appears in other media. And this is not...
2 minutes.
2 minutes. And this is not all. Israel keeps on taking care and treating its enemies. I know that some people would find it difficult to believe, but both the mother-in-law and the daughter of Ismail Haniyeh, the prime minister of the Hamas in Gaza, were treated in Israeli hospitals. Even the wife of Mahmoud Abbas, the chairman of the Palestinian Authority, was treated in a hospital in Tel Aviv. And lately, just this week, I heard that the daughter of Abu Marzouk, another leader of the Hamas in Gaza, was treated in a hospital. There is criticism about it amongst Israelis who don't understand why we should do that, but this is what we are. As I said, we sanctify life, and that's the important thing for us. I have a lot to say, but since my time is limited, I'll stop here and leave the floor for my colleague.
Thank you, Ambassador Modai. I'd like to make it clear, this is a meeting of the Philosophy Society. The weakest argument of all is that of force and of shouting. If anyone does not want to respect the long-standing dignity and characteristic of philosophy, he or she can now leave. Otherwise, it is presumed that everyone will be respectful of the ambassadors who gave their time to come along this evening. I will not tolerate any disturbance. That is absolutely clear. There is time afterwards for you to send your questions via email to the auditor. They will be presented to the ambassadors, and that is how the discussion will take place. If you don't like it, there are 4 doors and they're all open. The security men will open them from the inside, and you're welcome to leave. And please do now, if you're not happy with that. Is that okay? Very good. So I'm pleased to invite His Excellency Ahmad Abdelrazek to respond to the Israeli ambassador.
Thank you, Professor. Also my thanks to the organizers who gave us this occasion, and also to meet you. It is always a pleasure to come to the university. As I said, always we feel younger. And something I'm happy to discover this evening, since the ambassador said his family is in Jerusalem more than 200 years. So I'm happy to discover that he is Palestinian also.
I am, I admit.
So, we never said that Palestine is a pure race, is a pure ethnic. Palestine is always were a mixture. I remember my father, who used to tell me, in Haifa, Mr. Ambassador, the market, Hadar market in the upper Haifa. And that market was for the Jews, and there's a market down for the Arabs. And my father told me half of the time he worked in the market of Hadar, because he was agriculture, growing agrumes in Hadif, because I come from there, from Palestine at that time. I'm a refugee. I was born in Lebanon as a refugee. My parents were obliged to, as more than 800 Palestinians, to leave Palestine in 1948. And this was by force. And it's not me who says that it was by force. It is the archives of the Israeli army, because there are, some Israeli researchers who looked in these archives, and they discovered how the Palestinian peoples were obliged to leave Palestine. And going back to the history, you are right. Jerusalem has been mentioned many times in the Bible. But first of all, Jerusalem is not Zion because its name exists before the Hebraic. If the Bible, because the Bible, you know, is a historic written, so nobody is know the exactitude of what in it. But at least concerning Jerusalem, in the Bible, it is mentioned. It is the Canaanite city, the Jewish city, and it was conquered by David, according to the Bible. But it doesn't mean it was the first. It was a capital of the Canaanite before the Jews. And we are not going battling at 4, 5, 10,000 years ago. Who was there? Who was people moved in this earth? You know, if we want to go back to the history, so I can say, look, we have been in Andalusia in Spain, and there are the mosques in Cordoba and everywhere, so we can pretend that we have the right to take them back. They are ours, because we Muslims, we were there. God is not a real estate agent. We live here in reality, in politics. And reality says, the archaeology, that since the occupation of East Jerusalem in 1967, the Israeli archaeologists digging and digging and digging till today, till now, they couldn't find any archaeological sign that the temple was built here, there. And scientists do not agree on the exact place where the temple was built. And you cannot aggress a people and its religion because of myth. You cannot create a religious war, which is the most dangerous for both of us, for the both of our people, to have a religious war because of a myth. So these last years, all these fanatics who are trying to transgress the Al-Aqsa esplanade are pushing for this direction, a religious war. Our problem is political, and we want to keep it political. Jerusalem is an occupied city. It is, by the international law, is an occupied city, recognized by everyone except by Israel. It is an occupied city. Even your stronger ally, the United States, don't recognize Jerusalem as you pretend the capital of Israel. So please don't turn this question to a religious one. Keep it political. And I'll go back to the war on Gaza. This is not the first one. And if the situation continues like that, I don't think it will be the last one. Why are these wars? Because we have to look to the real problem. The real problem is occupation. Of course, the Israelis say, but we left Gaza. You know, imagine an armed thief who gets into your house and he wants to stay at home. But you have many children who makes a lot of noise, so he's bored with the noise. He said, okay, I'll leave the house, but I'll stay out. You and your children, you cannot move from the house except when I permit you to leave the house. This is what happened. Gaza, since 7 years, is an open prison. 342 square kilometers for 1.8 million people. You can imagine the density. They cannot move, they cannot live, they cannot work, except by order from Israel. This is the real problem. The real problem is the occupation. And you say, you take care of life. And we don't have to count the number of those who are killed. And the tens of thousands who are injured. And the hundreds of thousands who were displaced from their houses, and their houses are destroyed. I can also, you don't even care for your soldiers. And I'll tell you, you remember in the beginning, a whole area, residential one, was destroyed completely by the Israeli planes and guns and tanks. Why? Because Israeli soldiers were fought in an ambush, and Hamas were going to take soldiers as prisoners. The Israelis, that you forget to say, Mr. Ambassador, you have the Hannibal Doctrine. The Hannibal Doctrine says that there should be never an Israeli soldier prisoner. And for that, you have to erase everything. You have to kill everybody, even the soldiers, if it is necessary. And that what's happened that day. That's why a whole area was erased. And when the representative of United Nations went there, his first phrase was, I thought it is an earthquake. So the problem is how we can support all that all the time. We say we defend ourselves. Of course, everybody has the right to defend himself. But if he is aggressed, if he's not occupying another people, if we take the history, let's start by example of Ireland. Ireland, before it was free, there are attacks against the British against it. But since they are free, there have never been any hostility between the two people. On the contrary, after hundreds of years of hostility, they became friends. And we see the result by the visit of the Queen and the visit of President Higgins to England. Take Algeria. After 162 years, there were violence between Algerians and French. But since the liberation, then the France decided to leave Algeria. There were no more attacks against France and no more attacks against Algerians. So peace is the point. Look at in the 70s of that war between the United States and Vietnam. Now they are working together. When the Americans left Vietnam, no need for hostilities. We are the last people under occupation. and you want us to accept you and to do nothing. You know, I remember once in France, there was a debate with a French philosopher, Marie Calter, Professor Cohen, know him well, and he said, you know, he's a man for peace, you know, I can admit, but sometimes, you know, he has some ideas. He said in one moment, I don't understand you, the Palestinians. You have a nice army, the Israeli army, and you prefer to have a country with dictatorship, with prisons. I said, look, please, give me the right to choose my dictator. So, this is my right. It's not a gift. And we have accepted to live side by Israel. Till now in Gaza, as you said, I'll tell you, even the United States couldn't support what's happened in Gaza. Give you an example. The State Department spokesperson,
2 minutes.
she said the United States is appalled by today's disgraceful shelling outside an UNRWA school in Rafah, sheltering some 3,000 displaced persons. And the Israeli army told the people to evacuate their house and to go to the defined places, among them the UNRWA schools and the beaches. And the beaches, they bombarded the beaches and killed the children who were playing football. So, to solve this problem, we have to finish with the occupation. And we say 2 states for 2 people. That's it. And I don't agree that your neighbors, they don't want you. Remember in 2002, the Arab countries has presented an Arab peace initiative. Exactly it says, if Israel evacuates the Arab occupied territories, all Arab countries will establish normal relations with Israel. What do you want more? What we can give you more? All Arab countries. And has been agreed by 57 Islamic countries also. They said the same thing on this initiative. They will establish normal relations with Israel. What we can do more? So, I think the problem is the occupation. When we finish with the occupation, we can finish with all that violence. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Abdelrazek. And now His Excellency Ambassador Modai will address you for 10 minutes.
Ambassador Abdelrazek, I put a difference between you and the terrorist organizations. I still do believe that the Palestinian Authority could be partners for peace. But the question is, this government that you represent here, do you really want to be on the right side of history? How much do you really want a Palestinian state? The replies to these questions should have been very simple, but I'm afraid they aren't. Our legendary foreign minister and ambassador to the United Nations, Abba Ibn, maybe some of you have heard the name, said once about the Palestinians that they never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. The Palestinians, I want to give you just a few examples. Palestinians that were the inhabitants of this land. And by the way, you're right. Those Jews who were born in Jerusalem in Israel before 1948 were called Palestinians. You may be surprised, but our citizen number 1, President Rivlin, was born in Israel before 48, sometime in the end of the 30s, if I remember right. I don't want to give something, he's not that old. But in any case, he calls himself Palestinian. He says, I was born in Palestine. That was its name at the time. So I don't see it as an offense, not at all. Now they had the opportunity. The people who lived there, and I'm speaking about your family that you mentioned that left in 1948, had already the opportunity to accept the decision of the partition of Palestine to two states, one for the Arabs, one for the Jews. That was in 29th of November 47. We agreed, the Jewish leadership in Israel, in Palestine at the time agreed, but it was not, the reply was negative from the Arab side. After the war of 67, just after Israel took control of Judea and Samaria, the Gaza district, the Sinai and all that, and the Golan Heights, we approached the Arab world and we said very clearly that we are stretching our hand for peace, and we are ready for that peace to give the land. Peace with the whole Arab world. The Arab countries convened in Khartoum, the capital of Sudan, and the reply was the infamous three no's: no to recognition, no to dialogue, no peace with Israel. That was the reaction, and actually this could have solved the problem if you make right the calculations more than 40 years ago. In the year 2000, during a dialogue between Prime Minister Ehud Barak and Yasser Arafat, the head of the Palestinian Authority, when the moderator was Bill Clinton, President of the United States, Yasser Arafat received a very generous offer, which he refused, and actually immediately after, organized or not organized, but we believe that the Intifada, the second Intifada that started, was very much connected to the frustration or the decision of the Palestinian Authority. In 2008, this was already your current chairman, Mahmoud Abbas, did not reply to very, very generous offers by the Prime Minister at the time, Ehud Olmert, and Minister of Foreign Affairs, Livni, who gave him an offer of about 98% of these territories, including swap of land. He did not reply to that. Actually, we accepted that as a no. More and more people in Israel, and I have the feeling that also around the world, doubt the real will of the Palestinians who are represented by the Palestinian Authority to have and to establish their own sovereign and independent state, living side by side in peace with Israel. Maybe they want a state for themselves, but they want it to be instead of the state of Israel, and that will never happen. You spoke about occupation. You mentioned occupation a few times. And I ask you, first of all, you may refer to the occupation 1967, but your partners in the government, Hamas and the Islamic Jihad, when they refer to occupation, they refer to the occupation 48. So which side should they take? Because 48, that means if Israel goes back to the borders before 48, that means no state of Israel exists. And this is the doctrine of the Hamas, and actually it exists still in the covenant that from 88, it never changed. But maybe you can tell us from whom we occupied it. Was there ever a Palestinian state in 1967 when it was occupied by us? If so, let me know who was its prime minister, who was its president, which currency was used in this country, in this state. I don't know. As much as I know, this land was taken in a war from Jordan and from, when I speak about Judea and Samaria, and the Gaza district from the Egyptians. It is not accidental that both Jordan and Egypt have no claim to these territories. If we occupied it from them, why don't they claim back this land? So that's another thing that I think should raise a few questions. Now, if we speak about absurds in this conflict, let me mention another one. That has to do personally with you, Ambassador Abdelrazek. The claim of the Palestinian Authority that all refugees from 1948 will have the right to claim their homes back homes that they used to live in before the independence war in 48, and I'm speaking about 700,000 Arabs who lived there. Many of them in mixed cities of Jews and Arabs, and many of them in Arab villages. Now, why did they lose their homes? Many of them because they were afraid of the war. Many others because they were promised by the Arab leadership, their leaders, and Arab leaders of the other countries that were involved, Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, Jordan, that they should leave their homes for a short period of time, and they will be able to come back as soon as the Jews will be thrown to the sea. That didn't happen, and those people now have not only them, but their grandchildren claim to have the right to come back. By the way, during the same years, 900,000 Jews were forced to leave as a result of violence their homes in Egypt, in Syria, in Iraq, in Lebanon, Yemen, Morocco, Tunisia, and many other Arab countries. Where are these refugees? Why don't you ever hear about them? Why? Of course, because they were absorbed immediately within a few years into the Israeli society, and they became free citizens in this country. Something that did not happen with the Arab refugees from Palestine, because they were never absorbed to the countries to which they arrived. They were kept in camps, in refugee camps, many of them until these very days, because the Arab world wanted and still uses them as a political tool. The problem of these refugees could have been solved long time ago. And I want to remind you that during the 20th century, tens of millions of people became refugees, left their houses, left their homes, and went to other places. It happened between India and Pakistan, tens of millions in Europe. Does anyone believe that the 2.7 million Germans that were expelled from the Czech Republic would have the right to go back to their houses today? Of course not. In our case, there is also another very peculiar issue. It is the first time in history that a people is asking the right of return to another country, to another state. They don't want the right of return to the future Palestinian state. They want to return to another state, which is Israel. And that is something that would not work. And as long as this is one of your preconditions, we do have a problem. I want to emphasize the only way to achieve an agreement between Israel and the Palestinians is through negotiation. I think that most of the world today realizes that fact. There are no shortcuts, there are no ways that bypass this way. I call through you to the Palestinian government, Ambassador Abdelrazek, to come back to the negotiating table and to accept the right of the Jews to have their own state and to choose life of peace and tranquility with us. This is the only way. Now, by putting pressure, I know that today it seems that you found a better way. This trick of putting pressure on Israel by the international community through the United Nations and the different agencies is something that eventually will not work. So you will get a lot of senates and the parliaments that would vote for the recognizing a Palestinian state, but did that decision, for example, of the Swedish government move you any one centimeter forward? No. As long as you don't come to have the negotiation with us, we will get nowhere. So I believe that this is the only way, and we will achieve peace only if and when you will accept us there. And you have to accept that we understand that you prefer putting the pressure on Israel by the international community, because this way there are no concessions. A dialogue should be compromised by both sides. You ask us today, for example, to put a map to show the boundaries of the Palestinian state. And we say that it is not less important before putting the boundaries to know who is going to be on the other side of the border. Because if today, and you said it during a meeting in the Doyle, that today it's the Palestinian Authority that governs, but it could be that one day in the future, within a year or 2 years, the Hamas is going to take over. And then we know the history. We know how Gaza looks like after we left this territory. And by the way, if I'll have the time later on, I'll refer to your claim that this is under, the Gaza district is under occupation. those that are responsible for the situation of the Palestinian Gaza district are only the Hamas. And I must say that I'm surprised that you found no reason to mention the Hamas and to at least to distinguish between you, the Palestinian Authority, and them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Modai. And now His Excellency Ambassador Abdelrazek will address you for 10 minutes.
I think there's something very important needs clarification that why Palestinians left in 48. Let's start from the beginning. I just want to remind that, you know, in 1970, Leo Motzkin from the Zionist movement, and he was liberal in the movement, said, our thought is that the colonization of Palestine has to go in two directions. Jewish settlement in Eretz Israel and the resettlement of the Arabs of Eretz Israel in areas outside the country. The transfer of so many Arabs may seem at first unacceptable economically, but is nonetheless practical. It does not require too much money to resettle a Palestinian village on another land. And David Ben-Gurion, who was the first who declared the state of Israel, he addressed the Jewish Agency executive in June 1938. He said, I am for compulsory transfer. I do not see anything immoral in it. This was before the creation of Israel. This was before the partition by the United Nations. That were the intentions of what to do with the Palestinians. And I also want to cite to tell you what a assistant commander has said. His name is Itzhak Bondik, assistant of Commander Shimon Abidon from the Balmach. There were 200 villages in the front, southern part of Palestine, and these are gone. We had to destroy them. It took 6 months to uproot more than 800,000 Palestinians, 531 villages destroyed, 11 urban neighborhoods emptied of their inhabitants. All these resources are from the Israeli resources. I never get one from outside. And the Palestinian exodus was one of the largest in post-war history, Second World War. And the reason for it were confirmed by the Israeli army intelligence as follows. Haganah operations, it was a militia at that time, Jewish militia, 55%. Operations by Irgun, another terrorist organization, 15%. And whispering campaigns of psychological warfare, 14%. This is the reasons why we had to leave our homes, our land. Then, you know, you talk always, the Israelis, about generous offers. You treat us as beggars. We don't want any generous offer from you. We want what the international law gives us, our right. It's not a generosity from you. And that's why we are losing every time the occasion. I don't cite myself. I'll just tell you the last 9 months. Last year we have negotiated for 9 months, and the negotiation is failed. I don't tell what all the world is saying, but I'll tell the one who was concerned in these negotiations. Mr. John Kerry Secretary of State of the United States, when he witnessed to the Committee of Foreign Affairs of the Congress. He said, unfortunately, prisoners were not released on the Saturday they were supposed to be released. It was an agreement with the Israelis. They didn't respect. And so they went by, day 2 went by, day 3 went by, and then in the afternoon, when they were about to maybe get there, 700 settlement units were announced in Jerusalem, and he said, poof, he did like that in the Congress, and poof, that was sort of the moment we find ourselves where we are. The negotiations were failed. And then to confirm what Mr. Kerry said, President Obama, he gave an interview to Jeffrey Goldberg at the Boom yes. And he says, Jeffrey is talking about President Obama. He told me that his message to Netanyahu will be this: if not now, when? And if not you, Mr. Prime Minister, then who? He then took a sharper tone, saying that if Netanyahu does not believe that a peace deal with the Palestinians is the right thing to do for Israel, then he needs to articulate an alternative approach. He added, it's hard to come up with one that's plausible. Obama made it clear that he views, I'm citing Goldberg, Obama made it clear that he views Abbas as the most politically moderate leader the Palestinians may ever have. It seemed obvious to me that the president believes that the next move is Netanyahu's. There comes a point, this is Obama, there comes a point where you can't manage this anymore, and then you start having to make very difficult choices. Obama said, do you resign yourself to what amounts to a permanent occupation of the West Bank? Is that the character of Israel as a state for a long period of time? Do you perpetuate over the course of a decade or 2 decades, it's 5 decades, more and more restrictive policies in terms of Palestinian movement? Do you place restrictions on Arab Israelis in ways that run counter Israel's traditions? I think he doesn't know the Israeli traditions. So this is the problem. The problem that they don't want a solution. And you talk about Hamas. We don't agree. I don't agree with Hamas for many reasons. Not only its approach to the problem, but also for ideological and sociological questions concerning me as Palestinian. But Hamas is a part of the Palestinian people, like many extremist Israelis are part of the Israeli people. We cannot say, send them away and we can make peace. You tell me about the charter of Hamas, I'll tell you about the charter of Likud. Who is in the government? Who is the government headed by Prime Minister Netanyahu? What the charter of Likud? The Jordan River will be the permanent eastern border of the state of Israel. Jerusalem is the eternal united capital of the state of Israel and only of Israel. The government will flatly reject Palestinian proposals to divide Jerusalem. The government of Israel flatly rejects the establishment of a Palestinian Arab state west of the Jordan River. It means in the West Bank. So you have the same ideology as Hamas, even worse. So, but, you know, I cite President Peres, the ex-President Peres, what he said 2 days ago. He said, is the Jewish nature of Israel determined by a signature of a Palestinian leader? Of course not. The Jewish nature of Israel is up to us, to you. You can decide what nature you want. Nobody can and, you know, he said also about your neighbors that reject you, also the same occasion 2 days ago, while welcoming the Arab Peace Initiative, a change from the Arab world's position in 1967 that rejected peace, recognition and negotiation with Israel. He decried the fact it is the only one on the international table. So, we give you the chance to be recognized by all countries. And for the refugees, there are two questions about the refugees. There are the principle, of course I have the right, I'm a refugee. But there are the practical one, and we said that will be negotiated with you. And our President Abu Mazen has said clearly, I know, if I have a peace agreement with Israel, I will not go back to Safad. I think it was clear what he said. So please be clear. We don't play on that you give us opportunity, we don't give us an opportunity. And generous and not generous. We have international law. We have to apply the law. That's it. Because without a solution, without justice, would not be a solution. There will be no peace without justice. Not only in our region, everywhere. Where there is no justice, no peace. And thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Abdelrazek. Before we begin the final exchange, just to remind you that you have the opportunity to email questions to the auditor who's sitting at the back of his writing. So this is the good opportunity now to finalize your questions. So in the final and third exchange, His Excellency Modai, His Excellency Ambassador Modai will speak for 10 minutes.
Not without my microphone.
Microphone diplomacy.
He will accuse me. I don't let him speak.
Okay. First of all, I hope that at a certain point we'll start speaking about the future, because we concentrate a lot about who said what and when. I don't want to put more pressure about the fact that you didn't reply to the issue of the 900,000 Palestinian Jewish refugees from Arab countries, but that can be easily compared to the issue of the Palestinian refugees, and I think that is something that could not be ignored whenever we'll have a discussion about that. You quote things that were said by Secretary of State Kerry and by the President Obama, and the fact that they criticize Israel for different declarations or different actions. It is strange because at the same time, you, the Palestinians, plus many others around the world, claim that we control completely the American president and his government. So I wonder how come we control them and still criticize us. I also believe that the relations between Israel and the United States are as strong as ever. And the fact that sometimes we beg to differ about things that are important for our existential future, it's fair enough not to agree. You refer to something that was said by Secretary of State Kerry. You didn't refer to the fact that just a few days afterwards he apologized for the way he put the things. He meant something a little bit different, but that doesn't matter. President Obama said that Mahmoud Abbas is a moderate leader and we will not get anyone more moderate than him. I hope he's wrong, because we also wanted to believe that Mahmoud Abbas is the leader that will bring the Palestinians the desire to have their own state. We ignore the fact that in his doctorate work in university, He denied the Holocaust, the Shoah of the Jewish people. The fact that he keeps on inciting his people on a regular basis. And I'm speaking about his declarations in the press, the Arab press, not what he says to the Israeli media. I'm speaking about a letter of condolences to the family of a terrorist that killed a baby of 3 months old. If this is a moderate person, we will probably have at a certain point to wait for his successor. When you read parts from the convention of the Likud, I just wonder when it is from, because it's certainly not from the last 2 rounds of elections. As you probably know, Prime Minister Netanyahu has been speaking for a long time about 2 states for 2 people since 2009 at least, and that is a change of heart, change of mind for him, which was taken too lightly. But this is his position, this is the position of the government. There might be people in his own coalition who may speak differently, but this is one of the differences between Israel and the Palestinians, because, as I said before, in a democracy everyone can express his views, even if they are not, if they don't coincide completely with those of the Prime Minister or the leader. I would be very happy to see 150 NGOs working against the government of the Hamas, as is the situation in Israel. I don't know if you're aware of that. 150 NGOs working against the government, and many of them are supported by this government, by the government of Ireland, by many other European and other governments in the West. I don't know of any NGO that works against the Hamas, and actually we saw during the war how not even one journalist had the courage to mention the very simple fact that the Hamas was using the citizens of Gaza as human shields. Only after the war was over and there was a long ceasefire, first it was an Indian crew, television crew, and later on a French journalist from France 24 who showed exactly where the missiles were launched from, and that was just near a UN headquarters and near the hotel where all the journalists were located. So there is a difference, and that's something that I wanted to emphasize. Now you speak, and not only you, many people mention the settlements as an obstacle to peace. I want once and for all to explain the position. First of all, we had dialogue for many years without any problem with these settlements. Actually, when we signed the Oslo Agreement, not even once it was mentioned that Israel should halt the building in the territories. No, not many of you would know, but since 1998, Israel did not build a new settlement. All we do is that we enlarge the actual settlements because people need more place. Young people want to live near their parents, and you have to build kindergarten, schools, and so on. And this is the main reason. It is true that Prime Minister Netanyahu says that Jerusalem would remain united. We believe that it should remain united. We proved since 1967 that Israel gives the right to all religion to practice in the holy places, which wasn't the case, I want to remind everyone, between 48 and 67 under the Jordanian regime. No Jew was allowed to get to the Wailing Wall, the most holy place for Jews. Since 67 that did not happen. The fact that for one day last week Israel had to shut down the Temple Mount for security reasons for 24 hours because we were afraid that the violence would take over and people may be injured or even lose their lives, that was tackled in a way because there are, as I said before, those who try to transfer the conflict, the political conflict, into a religious one, and you said rightly, this is very dangerous, and we should be very careful not to do that. In 1967, when Israel took control of the Temple Mount, we agreed that first of all the Waqf, which is they get their orders from Jordan, from Ahmad, would keep on its rule of this of the compound. That's one thing. Secondly, what we agreed is that Temple Mount would not, on the Temple Mount, Jews and Christians would not be allowed to pray, only Muslims. And that's something we saw it as a gesture. I know that today there are people, even in the coalition of Mr. Netanyahu, who claim that this status quo should change and Jews should be getting the permission to pray on the Temple Mount. I can guarantee to you here and now that the government of Israel, this government and not any other government in the world, would allow it. So people, even members of the parliament, can keep on saying whatever they wish. Again, democratic country, free speech, but this will not happen because we understand that the changing of the status quo is dangerous, and it will not get anyone any profit from that. I also want to mention, when you speak about occupation in Gaza, and I want to refer to that, the Gaza district, in 2005, when we left the Gaza district unilaterally, and not even one soldier or civilian remained there. We even left the glass houses there. And the Gazan Palestinians decided to destroy them, even though we were really hoping, and actually that's what was said by our Prime Minister at the time, Ariel Sharon, that when and if and when the Palestinians will have, and the first time, by the way, in history that it happened, they received a piece of land in which they could build their own sovereign state for the first time. They were never given anything like that. But we gave we thought that this is an opportunity to prove that they can behave differently and they can run their own businesses. It didn't take them long before they ruined completely the glass houses, before the Hamas took over. And I know that you cannot say that publicly, but in elections that were, some people claim that they were not the most fair elections. As a result, immediately after Hamas took over, they threw hundreds of AP people from rooftops, and that's again something that, because of the special arrangements and relations between you and Hamas, you will not mention them. I think that what happened is that in less than a year, 2 vessels were intercepted on the way from Iran to the Gaza district with armament and missiles on them. And this is the only reason why we decided to put a blockade on the Gaza district. Because otherwise, in any case, the Gaza district became a hub for armament, and the fact that 4,500 rockets and mortars were shot towards Israel, or launched towards Israel, just proved the fact that they had this armament. And I know that some of it is being produced there. A lot was imported from Iran. And since the blockade, we have intercepted another few vessels. So telling us that the blockade is an obstacle, you should blame the Hamas for that. And I think it is about time that Gaza will be free. It is time to free Gaza from the Hamas. When that will happen, as the foreign ministers of the European Union claim, Gaza should be demilitarized immediately. That is the only way to solve the problem, to bring the constructions to the right path. When that will happen, you will see that a lot of things will change in this district. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Modai. And now the final portion of the formal presentation, His Excellency Ambassador Abdelrazek.
About the Oslo Agreement. When we signed the Oslo Agreement, there are 2 things. You said nothing has been mentioned about constructing the colonies, but it was clear what has mentioned that nothing will be done that will change the permanent situation of the occupied territories. That means you don't have the right. And by the international law, it's a crime, it's a war crime. Why? Because in the Geneva Convention, you don't have, a occupying power doesn't have the right to transfer the population, the occupied population, and doesn't have the right to transfer its population to occupied territories. It's international law. It's not a question that you want, you don't want, you like, you don't like. And then, if you say we didn't build anything, then since how can we explain that when we signed Oslo Agreement, there were only 132,000 settlers in the occupied territories, including Jerusalem, and now we have more 600,000. If it is only natality, wow! So you are in these 20 years a fantastic percentage of births. Then, and you say you don't build settlements. I also will cite Obama, what he said in the Bloomberg View, to what he wanted to tell Prime Minister Netanyahu. He says, if you see, addressing Netanyahu, if you see no peace deal and continued aggressive settlement construction, and we have seen more aggressive settlement construction over the last couple of years than we have seen in a very long time, Obama said. If Palestinians come to believe that the possibility of a contiguous sovereign Palestinian state is not longer within reach, then our ability to manage the international fallout is going to be limited. Even your great ally is knowing what you are doing is illegal. That's why even United States considers the settlements are illegal. Not only Europeans, not only United Nations, not only the whole world, even your allies is considering illegal. Then, I believe that, remember, when President Peres said that he negotiated with President Abbas and they were arrived to an agreement, but Netanyahu stopped it. So what do you want from us to do? This is the question. What do you want from us? Always you go back to Gaza and Hamas. Hamas has said clearly, if there's a peace agreement and the Palestinian people agree on this agreement, we will abide by that. And you cannot ask Hamas to recognize and to be very gentle before we arrive to a peace agreement. That's what, this is what President Peres always say. And, you learn to live together after you make peace. You don't live together if you don't have peace. So we have to finish with that. And stop also to talk about journalists. And I'll tell you what, in last month, what has been written in an Israeli journal about the reporters who were afraid from Hamas. It was in October, and they were outside Gaza when they talked. They spoke in Tel Aviv. Reporters who covered Operation Protective Edge in Gaza dismissed Israeli accusations of giving Hamas an easy ride. One is saying, it is a funny controversy, said one reporter who spent 3 weeks in Gaza and like most were interviewed, asked to remain anonymous. This is a post facto attempt to claim the media's bias and Netanyahu is therefore infallibly right. There were almost 800 journalists. All of them were afraid of Hamas. And then they all get out. Please get the reality, there is occupation, and there will be never peace between us if occupation remains. And you know that. If you continue and you talk about two-state solution that Prime Minister Netanyahu, he wants a two-state solution. How can we make a two-state solution when we have now 600,000 And tomorrow, if we continue like that, there will be 1 million. How could it be? So there's otherwise, he is lying. Either he is lying to your people, or he's lying to us. Because if you want peace, he doesn't construct. He knows that he will evacuate these territories. So why is constructing settlements? But if he is lying to his people, to bringing them to occupy territory, to tell them you will live forever there, and then he will evacuate them. And if his intention to keep them there, it means that he's lying to us. He doesn't want to make peace. So we stop to say Hamas is saying that, Hamas is thinking that, because ministers and in the Israeli government, they say they don't want any Palestinian state. Even, Mr. Ambassador, the Times of Israel, which is very pro-Likud party, and they recognize, their journalist David Horowitz says, the uncertainties were swept aside on Friday afternoon. It was in July 11, 2014, last July, when the Prime Minister, for the first time in ages, gave a press conference on day 4 of Operation Protective Edge. This is the war in Gaza. He spoke only in Hebrew. Now he's doing what the Arabs used to speak before, 2 languages, Arabic and English. He spoke only in Hebrew, and we are in the middle of a mini war. So his non-directly war-related remarks didn't get widely reported. The Prime Minister spoke his mind as rarely, if ever, before. For some, his overall outlook will seem bleak and depressing. For others, savvy and pragmatic. One thing's for sure, nobody will ever be able to claim in the future that he didn't tell us what he really thinks. He made explicitly clear that he could never, ever countenance a fully sovereign Palestinian state in the West Bank. This is approach the Likud. It's not the left opposition that you accuse them. They are selling Israel to the enemy. Who is saying that? It's not me. So if Israel wants to live in peace for the future of your children, for our children, we have to finish with the occupation. No other way. All the peoples of this world have passed this way. Only by finishing with occupation, they started to live in peace together. I'll give you 2 minutes, Professor. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'm sure you'll all agree that we had an invigorating discussion, and we're very grateful to their excellencies, Ambassador Modai and Ambassador Abdelrazek. And now we have some questions. So, since you were very brief in your final summation, I'll address the first question to you, Ambassador Abdelrazek. The question is, on the claims of occupancy and right, does the answer to the question, who was there first, only solve a historical question? Does the solution to peace not lie in the future?
Of course. That's why I said we will not keep talking about the past. We are talking about the future. That's why the Palestinians, they accepted to sacrifice 78% of what they consider it's their land, their right. So this is the future. This is why we accepted to only establish a Palestinian state and only 22% of the historical Palestine. This is our sacrifice and major sacrifice. So please, this is our vision for the future. But unfortunately, maybe the other side doesn't look at this and consider also its generosity that to establish a Palestinian state on only maybe less, even it's too much to establish a Palestinian state on only 22% of the that's why we say negotiations cannot go forever. We have been negotiating for 20 years for nothing. So negotiations should be based on two bases. A timetable and agenda. The timetable, we should finish with the question of the borders, because you cannot, for example, discuss security if you don't know where you will be and where the other will be. You cannot discuss your right of resources, which are yours, which are the Israelis. So we need to put a timetable, not an open negotiations, because during the open negotiations, what we have, construction and construction and constructions of settlements. That's what we have. So the future is to have two states and on the borders of 1967. Of course, we know there are some new problems. We are ready to discuss them. We are not, but that's the principle to have to start with a principle defined by the international law as 1967 borders.
Thank you, Ambassador. Now a question for His Excellency Ambassador Modai. The question is, His Excellency Ambassador Modai stated in his introduction that the conflict of Gaza should not be between religions. Yet he states time after time that Jerusalem should be seen as the capital of the Jewish people and not of Islam. How can religion be separated from this conflict?
I'm afraid there was a bit of misconfusion here, because when I spoke about this conflict not becoming a religious one, I didn't refer to Gaza at all. I was referring to the conflict and the possibilities of resolving it when relate to Jerusalem and the West Bank. I believe that the only way really to solve it is, as I said before, is by negotiation. I also think that maybe I was misunderstood. I don't want to say that I didn't understand me, but I explained myself badly. When I referred to the historical story, I didn't mean that the fact that Jews were there before means that Muslims have no right to Jerusalem, not at all, on the contrary. I mentioned the Temple Mount, and the only religion that has the right to pray there are Muslims, not us. We pray on the Wailing Wall. So this is was not my claim. I think that the best way to explain that is by referring to a speech that was given by Prime Minister Netanyahu about a year and a half ago, when he said very clearly, we have no doubts about our right to this piece of land. The Bible, the history, the archaeological sites, everything proves it. But there is another people that live here, and they have desires of their own to live as a state, as a country, a sovereign and independent state. We do not want and we do not intend to ignore these claims. So this is why we will have and we will live together side by side. Actually, what he was saying, and what I'm saying to you, Ambassador Abdelrazek, the solution is on the table. At a certain point, we, and if not we, our children, will live together as neighbors, because there is no other choice. Otherwise, we are doomed to kill each other for the rest of the history. That would not happen. The question is how much blood will be spilled before that happens. Now, I want to believe that your leaders, the Palestinian Authority, understand that as good as we do. People claim that the time is against this side or the other side. The time is not working for anyone, it works for itself. So we have to be serious about it and to have, again, to come back to the negotiating table as much time that it takes and to negotiate. Now, I know that when it comes to our security, the world or different countries claim that we are crazy about it. We are obsessed. You know what? It's correct. We are obsessed when it comes to our security, and this obsession comes from our history. We cannot leave our destiny in the hands of anyone else, only in the hands of our people, of our army. We, 80 or 70 years ago, the destiny of the Jewish people was in the hands of others. And we remember the results. We lost 1/3 of our people. We will not let that happen again. So we, whenever it comes to solving the problem, you know it, and I'm sure you, the leaders of the Palestinian Authority understand it. As soon as the security problems would be solved, Israel is going to look at this whole dialogue from a completely different point of view. Thank you.
A question for Ambassador Abdelrazek. Do you think Hamas has Islamic ambitions, making the issue a religious rather than political?
You know, every party has its own ambition. It's, some of them religious, some of them, you know, we have that in Palestine, you have that in Israel, you have that everywhere. You have many, but the question is what the Palestinian people want. This is the question. And the majority of the Palestinian people want to live in a secular state and in peace. They want peace. This is the most important. Hamas cannot control the Palestinian people. And in the 2 weeks ago, there were a poll. And in Gaza, Hamas were very, very inferior from the other major party. So, because people, they don't want the governance of Hamas. Hamas came by election because people believed in it. Now, after experience, they don't want it. That's it. Why we people ask us to be democratic, and when we choose, maybe it's a wrong choice sometimes, but people has chosen. It's their right. They made the experience, they changed their mind, like everywhere in the world. So, let us finish with the question, what Hamas wants. The question is what the Palestinian people want. And the Palestinian people, in this great majority, he wants, of course, he wants peace, he wants to live in peace and secular state. Of course, always there will be extremists in any population. Wherever you go, there are the extreme right here and there. And there are, in Israel, go and see the extremists. But are they the whole Israeli? I don't think so. So are we going to say, finish with these extremists and then come talk to us? No. It's the Israeli people who will decide. The Israeli people, they decided to elect Benjamin Netanyahu, which we negotiated with Benjamin Netanyahu. The Israeli people decide tomorrow to elect Herzog, we'll negotiate with Herzog. It's not our problem. Our problem is to negotiate with the state of Israel and to finish with the occupation. This is our problem. And Hamas will abide by that if the Palestinian people want that. And they want that.
Thank you, Ambassador. A question for both of our speakers. What impact has the influence of British foreign policy and their notion of partition had on the current political situation?
I'm not sure it's clear. Can you repeat it, please?
I presume, I doubt it's referring to the partition of Northern Ireland, but in fact, perhaps you could use that as an occasion for me to ask a question. have the parties considered the situation of Northern Ireland and the solution as a model for perhaps your eventual agreement in Concord?
I think there's the problem of Northern Ireland was it is a population of Irish population who have a division among itself. Here we are talking about two peoples, two countries. So I don't think the same experience to live together, maybe generations after they decide to live together, that will be their problem. But for a practical and how to say a wise solution is for the first step to live separated, to live two states separated.
I want you to mark this day in your diaries. I agree with the Palestinian ambassador. I think that we can draw some comparison, but in principle, except for the fact these are two conflicts, the differences are too huge. There are people, by the way, in Israel, both in Israel and amongst the Palestinians, who say that maybe the solution would be one state to the two peoples. We believe that, and I understand now that we both believe it, at this stage, this is a recipe for a war, for a civil war, whatever you want to call it. It will not work. I just want to mention, I don't know if it's according to the regulation, it's going to be one line. When you refer to the Hamas, the difference is that the Hamas is not a minority, they are the government. This is why we cannot ignore them. In Israel, you're referring to different parties or different people that represent themselves or represent small groups of people. The important thing is what the government of Israel does and says, and I think we should follow that and not refer to other elements. If the Hamas, and again, if the Hamas would be demilitarized, that would change the whole situation in the Gaza district, that can move the whole process, the political process forward.
You can keep the microphone, Ambassador Modai, because I have another question for you both, which runs, Israel seems to be the only working democracy in the Middle East. Don't you regret that the Israeli government didn't support the rise of democracy during the Arab Spring of 2011?
Who said that Israel didn't support the Arab Spring? When the Arab Spring started, almost 4 years ago, we decided that we are not saying anything. We would prefer to remain silent. Actually, I remember very clearly that Prime Minister Netanyahu was in an interview about different issues. He was asked, it was about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, he was asked about the situation in Syria. So he hesitated for a few seconds and then he said, any reply that an Israeli Prime Minister would give regarding Syria is wrong. So I prefer to be quiet. This is not our issue. We are looking with very alert to what's happening in the region. It is true that Israel is the only democracy in the region. Actually, people who go to Israel, who visit Israel, find it amazing that the level of freedom in every part of Israel to every citizen, and the fact is that we are a special and a different example for this region. In the Arab Spring didn't bring with it democracy, because democracy doesn't mean just going to the ballot and vote for a prime minister. Democracy is something that needs education for a generation or even 2 generations before it can become a real democracy. Even the Palestinian Authority, which I respect and I want to give them the credit for because I do believe that they can deliver the goods, even there should have been elections quite a while ago, but from different reasons that I'm not the expert. You may be able to say why the elections never took place. Not speaking about the Hamas. From them I don't expect much. They had elections in 2006 in Gaza, and that was the last elections. I don't know if and when they will have other elections. But we, as I said before, and I started with that, we are not against the Arab Spring. We were hoping so, that this would bring tranquility and more freedom to the peoples of the region. But we did express in some cases, I remember even myself once in an interview expressing concern. I said that if you don't come from the Middle East, it is more difficult to understand, and I just want to hope that things would go the right way, but I'm not sure that would happen. Eventually, it didn't take more than a few months until it all became something completely the opposite of what the world was expecting and hoping for.
Just, okay. I don't like to just, as you said, we have people who don't want peace, but also it's not individuals in Israel, as you said, they express themselves because they are part of the government. When you are a part of a government, you don't express yourself. So, and they are big parties now, and I'm afraid that one of them, the most extremist, will be the biggest party in next elections if we see the atmosphere now. But this is not the problem. The problem is we have to finish with the occupation. And I think this is what the fundamental question that we have to solve. And as you said, of course, we need time, we need reconciliation, need time to live in peace, that need time. It doesn't come. You have a peace with Egypt, and you used to say we don't trust the Arabs, okay? But with Egypt, peace is still peace. You can call peace, have peace, want peace. It's not a problem. They respect what they signed. There have been changed, 3 regimes changed in 4 regimes, if I call Sadat, Mubarak, Morsi, and now President Sisi. 4 regimes, and nothing changed for Israel. Peace is still peace. The Jordan is the same thing. And we understand your problems of security. We understand, we know, everybody, we know your traumatism of the Holocaust. But there are solutions also for that. So it's not only because of that we don't advance, we don't make peace. About the elections, you know, Mr. Ambassador, the reason. Because there were division between West Bank and Gaza, we couldn't organize the elections. Because if we organize it only in West Bank, that will be a division forever in the Palestinian people. And we refuse to do it. And then we have formed the unity government exactly for the purpose to organize elections. And what have destroyed all that? The assault on Gaza. Now, what we are occupied with is to rebuild what we have destroyed. This is our most, because people, winter started, and people have no shelter. Hundreds of thousands of people have no shelter. Our priority is to give them shelter. This is our priority. So with you, we have almost to start from zero, unfortunately. We want to finish with that. We want to build and continue to build, because this is the only way. And be sure, there will be elections, and we need the elections more than you can imagine. And that's why President Abbas says he will not represent himself in the second elections. So, but leave us alone to make the elections, please. Thank you.
Question for Ambassador Modai. Do you think that it is wrong for Mr. Netanyahu to include the nationalist Avigdor Lieberman in his government?
Somebody here wants to get me into trouble. Minister Lieberman is my foreign minister. Israel is a democracy, and in every government, I think at least since 1977, every government was a government of coalition, because never one party can win more than 50% of the votes. And that means that there are a lot of compromises. That's an historical thing, that when you have to join religious parties or ultra-Orthodox parties into your coalition, it means that you have to pay some price and compromise on things that maybe you as a prime minister wouldn't have liked to have. But that's how it is. I think that...
Excuse me, sir. You will please be quiet. You will please be quiet, or you will be asked to remove. Please leave the room. Please leave the room. I'm going to group two questions for Ambassador Abdelrazek.
Can I just say a few more
Didn't
words
finish.
about
The
this?
ambassador
My boss, just a few more words.
I'll beg your pardon, sorry.
Okay,
Yes,
okay.
this is what happens if people don't respect the ground rules of the discussion. Apologies, my apologies.
I don't know if somebody is recording it and something may get to my minister. I just want to make sure that I explain that, and I say it really from the bottom of my heart. Mr. Lieberman has a worse image in the public and in the media than he really is. I met him in different occasions. His views are not as radical as sometimes it sounds. That's as a bottom line. The other thing, Mr. Lieberman is for peace. He wants peace. He lives in a settlement which is not part of what we call the centers of villages and towns, but a separate and small village. And when he was asked about it, he said, one day, if we will sign a peace agreement with the Palestinians, what will you do? He said, if that will be the case, and this will be a real peace, I will leave my home in Nokdim, and I'll go and live back in Jerusalem or in Tel Aviv or wherever I wish, within the borders of Israel. So I think somebody that says that, you should at least respect the fact that he means it, because you can say many things about him, but he says his mind. Sometimes a lot of people don't accept his mind, but that's at least he's real in anything he says.
Thank you, and apologies.
No problem.
Two questions which I've grouped together for Ambassador Abdelrazek. Firstly, where would the Israeli people be expected to go? If the Arab peace agreement was agreed, surely there would be no Israel. And then the second related question, if Hamas' main goal is to destroy Israel, why do you say that there would be no further attacks on Israel if they were to withdraw?
Sorry, the first question I didn't really understand.
Where would the Israeli people go? If the Arab peace agreement were agreed, surely there would be no Israel.
They go home in Israel. You mean the Israeli in occupied territories or the Israelis in Israel? I don't understand what the question. If the Israelis in occupied territories, they will go to Israel. It's normal. And if he's talking about the Israelis,
the settlements, perhaps.
Yeah, but the settlements, if but that's what I say. The Israelis in the occupied Palestinian territories, they will go back to Israel. But if he means the Israelis, it's their problem to decide where they want to go, to stay in Israel, to go to immigrate. That happens to every people. You decide what you want to do. It's not our problem. Concerning the Hamas, when we accepted in the peace negotiations, we said a Palestinian state will be demilitarized state. So nobody will have rockets, nobody will have arms to launch. This will be the authority of the authority of the law. Because this is the purpose of the peace. And the Israelis know that there will be no peace treaty if these arms are not withdraw from the some Palestinian hands. So it is considered that there will be no armament, except, of course, what has been agreed upon for the police and the civil protection. That's it. Sorry, but about, just to understand, if somebody asks me about my minister, I cannot answer. But I think if Mr. Lieberman really he believes in peace, instead of waiting to sign an agreement to lead the settlement, he can give the example for the others and leave and tell them, look, I read, you can leave. This is a good example for peace.
A question for Ambassador Modai, which I'm paraphrasing. Why are some Palestinians not allowed to move freely on roads near their houses, those houses which surround them, in the West Bank?
I'm afraid this is a too hypothetical and theoretical question, because which Palestinians, which roads, when, what are the circumstances? In principle, I don't use the expression, as you've noticed, occupied territories, but in those territories under dispute that are in the hands where Palestinians rule, we have to understand that during the Oslo agreements, it was decided to divide these territories to three. Area A in the hands of the Palestinian Authority, Area B is a common one, meaning it's the hands of the Palestinian Authority, but Israel controls this area militarily, and Area C is under the Israeli control. By the way, in Area C, only 4-5% of the Palestinian population live at this stage. Now, I know that we know that in some special occasions, restrictions may be put on going in different roads, but in general, somebody wants to get to his home, nobody says to him, no, you can't go to your home, it's forbidden, this is you're not allowed to. These things don't happen. Sometimes he will have to stand in a checkpoint and he will have to wait a few minutes because of security alert, because of different things. I'm not saying it's pleasant, I'm not saying that, but this is the result of the huge waves of terror that Israel has experienced. Only about 12 years ago, more than 1,000 people were killed because it was easy for Palestinians to cross into Israel. And we have, as I said before, we are obsessed when it comes to security because we have to be, because nobody else is going to guarantee it.
And a question for Ambassador Abdel. Yes, please.
Yes. There's some inaccuracy, Mr. Ambassador, in West Bank, in the occupied territories, there are roads where what you call it, the bypass roads. They are specifically built for settlers. And the Palestinians, they don't have the right, not by occasion or by something, they don't have the right to use these roads. I know it. I know it because I can drive on this road because I have a French passport, not because I'm Palestinian. And we never see a Palestinian car with a green plate can run on this drive on these roads. So there are a discrimination, an apartheid system in the West Bank, one for the settlers, one for the Palestinians. And it's not only applied to the roads, many things. I don't want to take the time for myself to mention, but this is, and the checkpoints, you say some minutes, please, one day, try to behave as a Palestinian and go to these checkpoints. And these few minutes, you will see how many hours is for everyone, and the humiliation on these checkpoints. You can imagine the humiliation on these checkpoints for hours. Try it once, and you will understand what I mean.
Unfortunately, time has caught up with us. There are many people involved in this evening's event, and they are confined to a rather strict timetable. But I have a moment to say a few words of thanks. In the first place, to their Excellencies Modai and Abdelrazek. You will agree, I'm sure, that we had an extremely insightful and tolerant debate, and this gives a very good example for the future. I think we all have learned from this evening. I'd like to thank a number of people who are involved in the organisation of this evening's event. Richard Butler, who's the senior officer for the societies of the university, arranged many things of which we were unaware, not the least of which was security. And in fact, I'd like to thank the security personnel, the Garda and the others whom I shall not name. And also a special person who deserves a word of thanks is Dr. Wolfgang Marx, because the School of Music normally has a choral examination here in the evening in the theatre on Tuesday evenings. So we had to transfer the piano from this lecture theatre to another lecture theatre. I'd like to thank the auditor and the committee of the society. I've been senior treasurer of the Philosophy Society for 30 years. In fact, next year the society will celebrate 50 years. It has good years, it has bad years. And once in a decade, you get an auditor who comes along with vision, with enthusiasm, with practical skills. And the auditor of the decade is, of course, Daniel Clifford. I had to restrain him. His first suggestion for a debate was between Pope Francis and Richard Dawkins. Unfortunately, Richard Dawkins' timetable was rather full. But we got something in that category, and we are extremely grateful. I even heard a very philosophical phrase. Ambassador Modai spoke of the existential future, and of course that is what it's all about. I'd ask you to express your appreciation to the ambassadors and to the auditor, and then Danny Clifford will say a final few words. Thank you.
I'll be very quick. Just want to say thanks again. It's an amazing turnout for a philosophy event. We don't usually have this many. I just want to say there's a huge thank you and privilege to host the debate with both ambassadors, His Excellency Ambassador Boaz Modai and His Excellency Ambassador Ahmad Abdelrazek. It was an absolute pleasure having them. Again, I'd like to thank Richard Butler, Owen Murphy and my committee, but as well Fran O'Rourke and Ivan Griffin and our moderator Fran O'Rourke. If you could remain in your seats just until the ambassadors have left. Thank you very much.